I'm Katy McEwan and I'm a final year PhD student at Teesside University. This is the final evolution of a presentation I've been hoiking around the last few years that talks to the overall project Uncertain Futures. My work follows a very strong tradition of youth sociology in Teesside. What I hope to maybe add is that I seek to understand a youth population that we've not heard from as much in the past. Uncertain Futures is designed to try and understand the circumstances, hopes and futures of young people in Teesside who come from neither great advantage or disadvantage, and how various trends of precarity are potentially being lived and experienced by this population. The underlying inspiration for the project came from this quote by Byrne in a special issue of the journal Sociology in 2005. He makes this statement in his introduction while making a really interesting point about who and what was perhaps missing from the issue. Byrne alludes to an estate in Teesside and the problematic class status of its residents. Who are the people who live on this estate and places like it, he asks. They may not claim to be working class, yet by the brands of their tongues they are. While not named by Byrne, the estate is readily identifiable to a Teesside local like myself as Ingleby Barwick, an enormous private housing estate that has its own distinct boundaries from other local towns and villages. Without conducting sociological research in places like this, we'll continue to know very little about these residents and their identities, although they work and vote and co-produce cultural practices, presentations and places. So in my research, I've conducted in-depth intergenerational interviews with parents and young people who live in Ingleby now or who've made it there and have moved on both up and down. Liminality is an anthropological concept. It refers to an in-between stage of a rite of passage, wherein an initiate ceases to be who they once were, yet has not yet fully become who they will go on to be. Liminality is about transition and it's about change. Importantly though, it's about ambiguity. This concept of betwixt and between on numerous levels offers a spatial and temporal way of thinking about boundaries and thresholds, how and where individuals are located within society, and how they recreate structure. The Teesside studies indicated that the school-to-work transitions of young people are only one critical part of the evolution from youth to adulthood. Many others are also vital, including the timing, nature, and accessibility of housing and family careers. In this project, I suggest my participants may be in a fourfold liminal state. The glass is then neither half full or half empty, and this is felt and experienced at various gradations. So firstly, they're living in a liminal socio-economic period, and in so are enduring precarious economic times, where inequality is expanding and pathways to secure social positions are receding. Secondly, they're living in a place itself marked by uncertainty and insecurity, and that this has an impact on becoming and belonging. Thirdly, that they're in liminal class positions, often appearing to be indeterminately classed and possibly struggling to identify with the class positions determined for them. Fourthly and finally, they're in a liminal stage of life itself, the youth phase, where they're attempting to make significant housing, family, educational and employment transitions. As such then, they're the missing middle in numerous senses, exposed to multiple layers of precarity which may be often rendered invisible. Some appear to navigate these insecurities with far more success than others, and it's by using intergenerational and in-depth interviews that I hope to understand a little more of why and how. So the largest of these scales I consider is the period itself, and whether that's marked by particular trends of marginalisation. Precarity as a concept attempts to define overlapping objective and subjective experiences of lived insecurity. There's relative consensus that it's evolving, and that it appears to grow from an absence, so a sense, a lived experience of uncertainty, instability and insecurity that's felt on a practical and emotional level. It pertains to general feelings of fear and anxiety around the climate, politics and the future, and it's directly observable, Guy Standing would suggest, in a flexible labour market that creates uninsurable financial and time scheduling risks. Just as capitalism and Fordism are not homogeneous, neither is precarity. Nielsen and Rossiter identify a multiplicity of precarity, so an ontological experience and labour condition that varies between nation-states. In addition to that, my research was carried out in a particular region that suffered significantly from deindustrialisation, the northeast of England. For young people in the middle, precarity can be demonstrated in a hollowing out of prospects, with a growth of what Susan Manning would call lousy jobs and lovely jobs, but a dearth of opportunity in the middle. This has been accompanied by a relentless push to personalised responsibility. Young people are told to aim higher, aspire and upskill, taking on all risk and liability for their own economic futures, in a financial and personal sense. This is all indicative of what Byrne would call a weak version of the explanation of young people's marginalisation and social exclusion, obscuring structure and neatly transferring public accountability onto private individuals. The second of these liminal or transitional stages is place itself. My place of study for this project is as yet seemingly unstudied. Ingleby Barwick in Teesside began life as a housing development in the late 1970s. At one point, residents will often proudly tell you, holding the title of the largest private housing estate in Europe. It's enclosed on three sides by the River Tees and has around 21,000 residents with an average age of about 35. It's predominantly owner-occupied, with a few social lets and a steadily increasing number of private rents. There's very few flights left from Teesside Airport, and it's telling the one of the few remains is to Aberdeen. Ingleby's home to a significant minority of offshore workers. There's also numbers of small business owners, but primarily it's public sector employees who've made Ingleby their home. The employees of local government and the emergency services make up much of the working population, and I'm interested, given the relentless cuts to these forms of employment, whether this adds to generalised feelings of insecurity and uncertainty. Ingleby is predominantly seen locally as not quite one thing or another, a transient place, the nature of its youth, lack of individual identity and community. That said, it has a distinct reputation across Teesside. To local people, it's a place bound up in class complexity. The nature of this was demonstrated quite well by two parents' very different reactions to their children moving to Ingleby that were shared with me. When one young person had left their working class estate to move to Ingleby, he said his mum told everyone who had listened for months she was so pleased for him. Yet another participant explained that their parent had been so ashamed they had, unsolicited, said to a taxi driver one journey, "I don't live here, we're just dropping her off," making sure to mention that she herself lived in Yarm. Those arriving here from local working class areas to the east of Teesside, like Thornaby, Stockton and Middlesbrough, had seemingly made it. Ingleby is a fantastical destiny of class, and is a place where those who Steph Lawler defines as getting out and getting away would seek to go. Yet for those in the solidly middle-class areas to the west, in Yarm and Eaglescliffe, which the estate draws ever closer to, it's manifestly beneath. Those from Hillbilly Barwick are frequently reminded of their less-than status by their middle-class neighbours. Particularly I hear of Ingleby's postcode, TS17, the same as Thornaby, being used by those above as a tool to put residents clearly in their place. It seems the residents of Ingleby may manage to distinguish themselves from those they left behind partially, but they still lack the codes in every sense to truly be socially mobile and remake their class status. Known from its inception on all sides as spam cities, few Teessiders have nothing to say about Ingleby. The third level of liminality is then closely tied up with place and what place means. The commencement of building on Ingleby, the new suburb for a new middle, typifies a much larger period of polarisation for the working class, albeit balanced precariously on revenue streams that were not guaranteed. Social historian Selina Todd plots the growth of a new middle from the late 1970s. This was strongly supported in political rhetoric that was used to argue for the end of class structure in turn. Performance anxiety seems endemic in this new status formation, however. Bev Skeggs eloquently demonstrates how women in more indeterminate class positions recognise themselves as that which they were hoping to avoid. Shame is a toxic emotion, one we tend to avoid at all costs. As my participant alludes to here, in her felt need to buy a new car for a move to Ingleby Barwick. So she shared, "When I moved there I still had my first car, and it was a really old Clio, and when I drove up to the house and I saw the cars and I thought, my car's going to look awful on this street. And so we went out and bought me a new car just because we'd moved to Ingleby Barwick, just so that the neighbours didn't think anything bad of us." She recalled thinking, is this what she really wanted, to be in a place where she felt this was necessary, but had done it all the same? Sam Friedman talks of transfugees, the upwardly socially mobile, who struggle to belong in the class destination they aspired to join, or any longer that which they left behind. Social mobility requires detachment and reattachment to class cultures, which can often be partial and incomplete, causing uncertainty and insecurity. Brown and Lauder state that those in the youth aid, what I suggest is the fourth and final level of liminality, are increasingly finding themselves in a labour market where the learning equals earning idea is losing its validity. Education and hard work no longer appear to offer a stable route to a secure future. Youth underemployment is framed alternatively as both a problem of over and under education, yet neither seem to provide a full answer. Many young people have played by the rules and aspired as was requested of them, yet still find themselves excluded from the jobs they worked so hard for. Many young people, Silver's US research has found, are reimagining these structural constraints as personal pathologies to be dealt with internally. Given that technological advancements and globalization trends predict the precarious economic situation faced by the missing middle will worsen, numbers of gringos, which is graduates in non-graduate occupations, prone to frustration and disillusion, will continue to grow. Adding complexity to these difficult education-to-work transitions are increasing house prices and ever-increasing levels of personal debt. It would appear that the current economic legacy these young people will inherit may no longer allow them to participate in society in ways earlier generations took for granted. Life in and of itself is precarious. As Butler points out, it's dependent on supportive social networks and favourable political and economic conditions. Those deemed unworthy of support or cast adrift by trends of individualism are in dangerous positions. And one participant pointed to the burden of all of this, explaining feeling abandoned in the middle and personally stuck. So she explained to me, "I do feel that the middle amount of people are getting disadvantaged, especially in the North East, because if you're relying on your parents and they just don't have that money, you're just stuck. You can't get on, and everyone's saying it's you need to do it, so you just kind of feel a bit stuck." Some young people I spoke to were in the process of negotiating all of these levels of liminality with apparent dexterity, moving through transition with great success, all while appearing relatively unburdened by pressure or concern. Others were very much struggling to maintain their positions, and gave the impression that they were what Amy and Alan called running up a down escalator at a standstill. They were anxious, strained, and facing potential downward social mobility. Perhaps inevitably, almost every young person identified these outcomes as the result of personal success or failure. Yet these differing transitions in actuality closely mirrored trends that matched others of their closest heritage or current class status. Numerous participants used the phrase Toy Town to describe Ingleby to me, never meant in a positive way. When pushed to define what they meant, they'll explain that it pertains to its inauthenticity, to a plastic, unreal, or make-believe status of place and residence. This is about possessions and buildings, but it's also about identity. The people who live in Spam City are, as one participant pithily put it, those who drink Carling out of Stella glasses. In every sense, then, for these young people, it seems their lives are liminal and in transition. Importantly, they're often seen to be playing at a class status which does not entirely belong to them, and their attempts are then marked as demonstrably incorrect by those above and below. This all throws up the debate of the mutable nature of class at all, when those I spoke to frequently rejected the class label which would be ascribed to them, instead describing liminal fates and hybrid identities. I love mysterious things and events, and a favourite of mine is a worldwide auditory phenomenon named the hum. This presents as a low, droning sound which some can't hear and which others are reportedly driven mad by. It's argued vehemently by different camps to be science fiction, science fact, mass delusion, or indicative of underlying, undiagnosed, individual medical issues. Class hums in the background in Ingleby Barwick, moving in and out of earshot, more maddening to some than others. The purpose of this research is to obtain a phenomenological understanding of these experiences, tuning into that hum, and how it's experienced by people in place and space. Being of the place Ingleby Barwick is a significant marker of value to many residents. It indicates their worth, and belonging here requires a performance of a complex mix of class identity practices. In their recent paper, Michaela Benson and Emma Jackson argue the increasingly critical nature of housing and class analysis. Ingleby seems an increasingly pertinent place then to look again at class.